A female chess prodigy strives to conquer the world of chess predominated by men. That is the subject of today's book review video. Hello everybody, this is Ben Koeberle here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button for new content here in this channel. Thank you for joining me today. I know it's been a long while since I last posted my initial book review video here on my channel. A lot has happened in between uploading my last video and now, of course. Nonetheless, I promised more videos and I'm here to do that now. Without further ado, let's get on to the video. In this video, I will be discussing the novel The Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis. Walter Tevis is the author who also wrote The Hustler, The Man Who Fell to Earth, and The Color of Money. Walter Tevis was born in 1928 and he died in 1984. Unfortunately, he died tragically young at the age of 56. His debut novel, The Hustler, was published in 1959. The Hustler went on to be adapted into the classic Academy Award-winning 1961 film starring Paul Newman in the lead role. His second novel and his follow-up novel to The Hustler, The Man Who Fell to Earth, was published in 1963. The Man Who Fell to Earth went on to be adapted into a 1976 film of the same name, directed by Nicholas Roeg and starring David Bowie in the lead role. His 1984 novel, The Color of Money, which also happened to be the sequel to his debut novel, The Hustler, was adapted into the 1986 film of the same name, starring Paul Newman, reprising his role from The Hustler, and a very young Tom Cruise. Interesting enough, Paul Newman went on to win his first and only Best Actor Academy Award for his performance in The Color of Money. As you can see here, this is the Ishii Press International edition of The Queen's Gambit. What I found so interesting about the cover of this book is when I started reading this book, I went online and discovered that this cover just happens to be the cover of the original first edition to The Queen's Gambit. So I found that really cool and really fascinating to discover there. It took me more than a week to peruse The Queen's Gambit. It's not too long of a read. The Queen's Gambit is less than 250 pages long. However, I'm so pedantic and so technical when it comes to the page length of books, so The Queen's Gambit ends on page 243. However, the book starts on page 3, so technically that makes The Queen's Gambit at a little more than 240 pages long in terms of its page length. But overall, it took me more than a week to read, so not too long of a read, you could definitely say. I decided to read The Queen's Gambit because I had heard word about the recent Netflix adaptation of Walter Tevis's novel. I was very intrigued and I wanted to find out more about the story and what The Queen's Gambit was all about exactly. So fortunately, I was able to grasp a copy of The Queen's Gambit, and I was able to not only read the novel, but I also went on to recently watch the 7-episode limited series on Netflix. I'm actually going to be doing a separate video on my opinions and thoughts on this literary adaptation of The Queen's Gambit. I look forward to showing that to all of you. However, the focus of this video is just my thoughts and opinions on the book of The Queen's Gambit, so we're going to continue from this point forward with more on my thoughts of The Queen's Gambit. Now, before I go on to summarize the book, I just want to give you a forewarning that this video will contain spoilers from the story and the story's plot, so if you haven't read the book and/or have seen the recent Netflix adaptation of The Queen's Gambit, may I advise you to please proceed with caution. The Queen's Gambit is the story of Beth Harmon, Now, The Queen's Gambit begins in the 1950s. The story starts in the 1950s and it goes all the way to the late 1960s. So The Queen's Gambit is set over the course of a little more of a decade in the life of Beth Harmon. Anyway, The Queen's Gambit is about this girl named Beth Harmon. At the age of 8, unfortunately, she loses her parents in a tragic car accident. From there, her life forever changes. She ends up in this orphanage called Methuen. Now, the story starts off in the state of Kentucky. That's the state where Beth originates. The state where she originates is the state of Kentucky. Anyway, so Beth, after the death of her parents from a car accident, she ends up in an orphanage called Methuen. There at the orphanage, all of the children, they're given these tranquilizers, these green pills to keep them calm, subdued, easier to deal with, and easier to handle within the walls of the edifice for the staff members in particular. So from the beginning of the story, from the time she enters Methuen, she's addicted to these tranquilizers, these green pills, and these addiction to these pills will play a very important part in The Queen's Gambit, not only in The Queen's Gambit, but also in her life, as you'll come to see as you read throughout the book, or if you've already read the book. Anyway, so aside from the tranquilizers, another significant thing happens in Beth's life, and that just happens to be her sudden love for a particular game. One day, she has to go down into the basement of the orphanage to run an errand for a school teacher. When she gets down to the basement to run this particular errand, there she finds a janitor whose name is Mr. Scheibel, alone, quietly in solitude playing a game of chess. When she sees Mr. Scheibel playing this game of chess, this kindles her interest in this particular game. It kindles what will become a major love and a major passion over the course of her character arc through the rest of this story and through the early years of her life, very much so. Nonetheless, she sees Mr. Scheibel playing this game of chess, and she's very intrigued by what this game is and what it's all about exactly. At one point in the story, she ends up asking Mr. Scheibel if he can teach her to play chess. Now, initially, Mr. Scheibel, he's very hesitant and very reluctant to teach Beth chess, partly because she's a girl and she's a child and such forth. But after she keeps persisting over wanting to learn how to play this game, at one point in the story, Mr. Scheibel relents and he starts to mentor her in this game. He starts to teach her the ropes of chess, and he teaches her the rules of the game. To his amazement and to his surprise, over time, Mr. Scheibel is surprised to discover that she has this gift and this skill for chess, even despite being a fledgling chess player at such a shockingly young age. Here she is, this girl of age, at the age of 8 or 9, and she's a master at this game, this very young girl. And it takes the janitor, Mr. Scheibel, a lot of surprise to see this in front of his very eyes. So over time, as she gets older, she becomes very skilled at this particular game. Anyway, at one point in the story, several years have gone by since she's entered the orphanage, and she goes on to get adopted by this couple, Mr. and Mrs. Wheatley. She becomes their adopted daughter. From there on the story, she ends up leaving the Methuen orphanage and ends up moving into the Wheatley household as their newly adopted daughter. Now that she's in the Wheatley household, it's a new living environment for her, and it takes a little bit of time for her to get accustomed to this new living environment and these new surroundings. She's not only in a new household, she's also at a new school. At this new school, she feels like she doesn't belong there, she doesn't fit in there, she's a loner, she's an outcast, she's trying to get accustomed to dealing with new classmates, despite these new constraints, these new hardships, and these new setbacks in this new chapter of Beth's life. There's one thing that still persists and still remains in her life, and that just happens to be her love and passion for chess. Beth still has this desire to continue to ameliorate and develop and grow in her skills as a fledgling chess player. At one point in the story, she is able to enter into a state tournament for chess, the Kentucky State Tournament for chess, and to everyone's amazement and to everyone's shock, she goes on to win this particular tournament, and it just takes them all by surprise. So that's how the story of the Queen's Gambit starts off. It's about this story about this girl, this female chess prodigy, and her striving to rise to the top of the chess world. But along the way, as she's trying to make her way to the top, she faces some setbacks, and her young genius comes at a cost. And I'll explain that to you a little more later on in this video. A thing that struck me about the Queen's Gambit was the chess terms and the vocabulary. Now, unfortunately, I am not much of a chess player, I hate to say. I've never really played a game of chess, per se. So at first, when I was reading the Queen's Gambit, it took me a little while to get accustomed to all the different chess terms and vocabulary in this book. But I would say probably partway through, probably halfway through the book, I started to get accustomed to grasping all of this different terminology in the world of chess. For example, I know for a fact that in many chess matches, Beth Harmon likes to use the Sicilian defense. It's one of her favorite movements to make throughout all the different chess games she plays over the course of this particular story. So I thought it was very interesting, trying to get accustomed and get to know all these different familiar chess terms. And who knows, maybe someday, eventually, maybe I will take a crack at chess and see what I got in this game. But for right now, I'm just kind of living vicariously through the story and living vicariously through the life on and off the chessboard of Beth Harmon, the heroine of the story. Anyway, so going back to the story, so a thing that really depressed me and made me melancholic as I was reading The Queen's Gambit is Beth's not only internal downfall, but her external downfall as well. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier in this video, she faces her constraints, she faces her hardships, she faces her setbacks. Here, Beth is this champion on the rise in the world of chess, and she's gotten a lot of acclaim, and she's gotten a lot of success as this very young female chess prodigy. But however, she does have her demons and her struggles. There's the addiction to the tranquilizers that happened and began from the time she was an orphan at Methuen. In addition, there's also the addiction to alcohol. She became an alcoholic because of her adopted mother, Alma Wheatley. At first, initially, Alma Wheatley, she was very hesitant and very reluctant at the idea of her adopted daughter, Beth, playing all these different chess matches and chess tournaments. But however, seeing how much chess means to Beth and seeing what a life that chess has given to her adopted daughter, Beth, she takes notice of that, and ultimately, Alma becomes Beth's agent throughout her different tournaments that she plays largely during the first half, little more than the first half of the story, and you'll find out why. I don't want to give that major spoiler away right there. But anyway, so unfortunately, Beth's alcoholism started because of Alma Wheatley's alcoholism herself. Alma, in one part of the story, lets Beth try a sip of alcohol, So from here, this is what starts Beth's alcoholism, and unfortunately, so later on in the story, she ends up botching this Kentucky state tournament that she plays. She botches it, and she ends up dropping out of the tournament, and she goes down this downward spiral with her addiction to the tranquilizers and her addiction to the alcohol. And reading that part was just very melancholic. It made me melancholic as I was perusing this particular part in the story. You know, seeing her downward spiral and wondering if she was ever going to get back up again and ever have some kind of resilience despite all of the things that life threw at her, and not in a good way. Anyway, a thing on the other hand, on a more positive note, a thing that I liked about this story, and probably one of my favorite parts about reading The Queen's Gambit, was Beth's friendship with Jolene. Now, I'll give you a little bit of backstory. Jolene was the girl that Beth befriended when they were girls at the orphanage. Beth was very good friends with Jolene, and after Beth was adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Wheatley, they both went their separate ways. The paths of Beth and Jolene very much diverged, but later on in the story, during the second half of the story, Jolene makes an appearance. She comes back not only in the story, but she also comes back into Beth's life after Beth persists in finding where she is, because she really needs to confide in her and really needs to talk to her. But anyway, Jolene comes back into Beth's life. Jolene sees what's really wrong with Beth and how much and how far Beth has fallen and how she's really hit rock bottom, not only externally but internally as well. So what I liked about reading The Queen's Gambit is just the parts where Jolene helps Beth turn her life around and see her value and her worth, not only as a person but as a young woman, and as a young woman in a man's world, and that world just happened to be chess. And this is during the 1960s, and this may be a fictional story, but it really shows what would it be like if a female chess player was winning all these tournaments and striving to make her way to the top, as you see here in this story. But yeah, I really liked reading about Jolene helping Beth get back up on her feet and helping her rise from the ashes, and we see how resilient Beth is. You know, Beth definitely turned out to have a lot of resilience and had an inner strength that she didn't know she had beforehand in this story. So I definitely liked reading Beth come back, not only mentally, but physically. And I definitely really took to it very much. Another part I wanted to talk about in this video is, what does the ending mean? Now, another spoiler, of course, this video is full of spoilers, but a major spoiler is, towards the end of the story, during the climactic scene, Beth is in Moscow, Russia. She's competing in this major chess tournament, and this tournament features all of these formidable Russian chess players on the chessboard that Beth encounters on and off the chessboard. Anyway, so she plays in what's basically the most major and the most momentous chess match, not only of her life, but in her career as a chess player, against this Russian chess player by the surname of Borgov. She competes against Borgov in this grand finale of this tournament in Moscow, Russia, where the story is set at the very end. But fortunately, through persistence and thanks to the help of her friends, her fellow chess players, all of them who happen to be male, who, despite her gender and or sex, you know, they see her value and see their worth, and they come to help her at the very end. And when you read the story, if you haven't read the story, you'll find out how they end up coming to help this young woman compete against one of the most major chess players in the world, who also happens to be Russian. But thanks to the help of her friends, before she faces Borgov one last time on the chessboard, spoiler alert, she ends up winning the match against Borgov, and here she is, she comes out triumphant, she comes out victorious, you know. This young female chess player is triumphant and victorious following this major victory and this major triumph. And I just liked seeing that and seeing how the story ended in that direction there. But anyway, so what does the ending mean? So she's just won this major chess match between Borgov, and I'm now going to read to you the last 3 paragraphs of the Queen's Gambit. This is page 243 in the book. I want to read to you this passage and then explain to you my interpretation and what I think it means. So here in these closing paragraphs of the story, she's in Moscow, and she gets out of the car that she was being chauffeured around during her tournament in Moscow, Russia. But anyway, she gets out of the car and she goes to the park where she went earlier on during her stay in Russia. And here it is. Here is the passage from the end of the Queen's Gambit. When she looked out sleepily, they were stopped at a traffic signal. Up ahead to the right was the forested park that was visible from her room. She shook herself awake and leaned forward to the driver. "Let me off at the park." Sunlight filtered through the trees on her. The people on the benches seemed to be the same people as before. It did not matter whether they knew who she was or not. She walked past them along the path into the clearing. Nobody was looking at her. She came to the pavilion and walked up the steps. About halfway down the first row of concrete tables, an old man was sitting alone with the pieces set up in front of him. He was in his 60s and wore the usual gray cap and gray cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up. When she stopped at his table, he looked at her inquisitively, but there was no recognition on his face. She sat behind the black pieces and said carefully in Russian, "Would you like to play chess?" I just liked and reveled at how the story ended there in particular. You know, here she is, she just had this major triumph, this major victory, and now she decides she wants to play a chess game with one of the Russian citizens in the park that she went earlier on in the story. How I took the ending, what I think the ending means is, I think despite this major victory and despite this major win, not only in her life but in her career as a chess player, she wants to keep developing and keep growing as one of the world's greatest chess players. You know, she sees the Russian players and their solid work ethic, and she wants to apply that solid Russian work ethic to her prospective games as a chess player. So that's how I took the ending, is, you know, she wants to adapt that mindset and that solid work ethic as a Russian player into her future games and future tournaments as a young chess player. So that's how I took the ending. What I learned from reading The Queen's Gambit is, I would say what I learned from reading The Queen's Gambit is, it doesn't matter where you came from exactly. It doesn't matter if you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, or if you were born lower class, or you came from a lower class background. Look at Beth Harmon, you know. She was orphaned at a very young age. She lost her parents at the age of 8. She ended up as an orphanage at the Methuen Orphanage, but she went on to become an orphan, to become one of the world's greatest chess players. And it didn't matter where she originated or where you originated, because you can face all of these constraints, you can face all these hardships, you can face all of these setbacks, but still have that sense of resilience to get you to where you want to be in life. You can turn your life around, and at one point in your life, even if it's the darkest, hardest chapter in your life, you can just turn your life around and not only become a better person and a better you, but a better person and a better you for whatever is your major love and whatever is your major passion for life. And for Beth Harmon, it just happened to be chess. So that's definitely what I learned from reading The Queen's Gambit. Overall, I would say I like this book. I really enjoyed and really liked The Queen's Gambit. I would highly recommend it to literally about everybody. I would recommend this story to about everybody. So yeah, I definitely really liked The Queen's Gambit, and I would highly recommend the book. Now, before I conclude this video, I want to read a couple passages that I found from some articles I read when I was doing my research for this particular video. The first passage I'm going to read to you is an article from 1983, which also happens to be the publication of the book The Queen's Gambit. Herbert Mitgang is interviewing the author, Walter Tevis, about writing The Queen's Gambit. In these couple paragraphs from this article from the New York Times in 1983, Walter Tevis is talking about a common theme in his work. In addition, he briefly references The Hustler, which is not about chess, but about pool. He also briefly mentions The Man Who Fell to Earth, but for the most part, he's talking about The Queen's Gambit. So I'm going to read to you this excerpt from this article from 1983 about The Queen's Gambit from the New York Times. I write about losers and loners. If there's a common theme in my work, that's it. I invented the phrase born loser in The Hustler. In one way or another, I'm obsessed with the struggle between winning and losing. In The Queen's Gambit, my heroine is an outsider. In The Man Who Fell to Earth, the character is also an outsider, a tall, skinny extraterrestrial who also ends up in Kentucky. Pool is a dazzling game, a loner's game, and so is chess, Mr. Tevis said. They aren't team sports. You don't get the girls in high school by shooting pool or looking across the chessboard. Actually, I consider The Queen's Gambit a tribute to brainy women. I like Beth for her bravery and intelligence. In the past, many women have had to hide their brains, but not today. I definitely really liked that passage, and I thought it was really cool and really fascinating and interesting to read that passage and to see how feminist and how progressive that passage is to the story. And I definitely agree with many people that The Queen's Gambit is definitely very much a feminist story in a good way. I think The Queen's Gambit and the heroine of the story, Beth Harmon, is feminism in a positive light. Definitely. You know, Beth Harmon is not driven by her sex. She doesn't let her gender and or sex deter her from her accomplishments as a chess player. And I just thought that was so cool just reading that passage just after perusing this particular book. Now here is the second and last article excerpt I wanted to share to you. It comes from an article by Linda Blackford from the Lexington Herald-Leader. In this article, Linda Blackford writes about Walter Tevis, his life, his legacy, his works, The Queen's Gambit in particular. In addition, she discusses and interviews with Tevis's two children, Julie and William, obviously full-grown, about the legacy and life of their father. Now here in this brief excerpt, Linda Blackford interviews Walter Tevis's son, William, about his father writing The Queen's Gambit. He made a story about a game that people don't understand and made it interesting to people, William said. We all know what it feels like to play a game and to be an underdog and win at unbelievable odds. That concludes this book review video. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed and liked this video, be sure to hit the like button, the thumbs up sign, and if you haven't already, subscribe as well for new content here on this channel. Now I'm going to toss the ball into your court. Let me know in the comments section, what are your thoughts on The Queen's Gambit? Did you like the Queen's Gambit? Did you dislike the Queen's Gambit? Let me know in the comments section. Also, what are your thoughts on Beth Harmon as a character? Did you like Beth Harmon as a character? Did you dislike Beth Harmon as a character? Let me know in the comments section. Also, do you have a particular favorite character from the story? Is there a particular character in the book that you disliked? Let me know in the comments section. In addition, are you a skilled chess player? Are you not a skilled chess player? If you're not a skilled chess player, are you thinking about developing and taking an interest in this particular game? Let me know about that in the comments section as well. I'd love to hear and read about it from each and every one of you. Finally, have you watched the recent Netflix adaptation of The Queen's Gambit? What were your thoughts on this recent literary adaptation from Netflix? How does it compare to the book that I discussed just now? Let me know about that in the comments section as well. I'd love to hear and peruse about it from each and every one of you in the comments. That is all for the video today. In my next video, I'm going to be discussing my feelings and thoughts on the recent Netflix adaptation of, you guessed it, The Queen's Gambit. I look forward to expressing and sharing my thoughts to each and every one of you in my follow-up video. So I hope you all have a great day, evening, or night, depending on whenever and wherever you are watching this video now. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, so have a great day, evening, or night, everybody. Bye!